Is Israel still a democracy, or has it become a judicial dictatorship? From blocking the firing of officials to interfering in wartime security, the legal system is being accused of paralyzing the elected government. Today we examine the eighth front, the battle for sovereignty between the people and the court. Because, and here we're going to get to a long list, according to the courts, it is forbidden to fire the head of the GSS during wartime, despite the incredible failures and the explicit law that allows it. It is forbidden to fire the Attorney General, despite a government decision and the fact that she's done nothing but oppose the government. And remember, her task is to advise and aid the government legally. Her official title was the legal advisor to the government. It is forbidden to split the roles of the Attorney General, since she is the chief prosecutor, the legal advisor, and the supposed government representative in court, and more. It is an obvious conflict of roles. It is forbidden to appoint an investigative superior for the Military Advocate General investigation. That is, of course, the doctored, fake video accusing the IDF of sexual crimes that was faked and then leaked to the left-wing media in an effort to sabotage Israel's war effort and allow for a U.S. weapons embargo. This, of course, is a betrayal. Not to mention causing a huge spike in anti-Semitism, which caused harm to Jews across the globe. It is forbidden to carry out a judicial reform, even to try to restore some of semblance of equality between branches of government. It is forbidden to close Galei Tzahal, the army radio, which, might I remind you, only 3 countries in the world have an army radio, and only one of them, Israel, is so-called democratic. It is forbidden to close the Broadcasting Corporation, Kan, which is a tool of the political left. It is forbidden to close Al Jazeera without the approval of the Attorney General, who, of course, are terrorist supporters and enemies of Israel and were broadcasting live coordinates of where missile strikes hit during the war. It is forbidden to influence police policy. In other words, for the elected minister to inform the police of his priorities on which he was elected, like to combat car accidents or violence against women or to close cold cases or whatever. It is forbidden to influence the selection of judges. In other words, let's keep the situation where the judges select themselves, can veto any judge appointment, and thus have, for the past 30 years, replicated themselves and only promote judges that are left-wing nut jobs. It is forbidden to prevent road blockades, arson, and other protests. It is forbidden to remove a police commissioner from his position without high court approval. Protesters endangering the lives of Prime Minister and his family using firebombs are allowed. Protesters imprisoning the Prime Minister's wife in her hair salon is allowed. Protesters physically harming members of parliament and the government ministers and laying siege to their homes, even with their disabled children in the homes, is allowed. The Attorney General prevents an investigation of left-wing reporters on suspicion of assaulting women, even though video proof exists. The Prime Minister is buried in court during wartime, with 3 days a week on this kangaroo trial. Netanyahu is prohibited from clearing days for security discussions. Netanyahu is prohibited from clearing days for diplomatic international agreements. Netanyahu is forced to actually meet world leaders inside the courtroom. Opening an investigation into the sitting Prime Minister without the Attorney General's approval, which of course is illegal, is allowed. police wiretapping of the Prime Minister and his inner circle without a warrant is legit. The prosecution hiding, exonerating evidence in the Netanyahu trial, knowingly false advocates by the prosecution and the police are submitted. Investigations by senior police officers who are in conflicts of interest are allowed. Abuse and extortion of investigating subjects in order to incriminate the Prime Minister is allowed. Filing an indictment based on testimonies of, "I don't remember," or maybe there's a 60-40 chance that this happened, is allowed. Refusal to drop the bribery charge despite a request from the judges to do so, which of course hints that they feel there is no case, happens. Whitewashing testimonies to the Police Internal Affairs Bureau regarding improper police conduct is allowed. Prohibition on receiving a loan to fund this incredible trial that costs millions for the Prime Minister is fine. But at the same time, the taxpayer is paying millions to defend the major general advocate who faked, doctored, and leaked footage to harm soldiers who betrayed the country. Sure, that makes sense. Ordering a pay ban for teachers in religious education schools is fine. That the courts order that despite the laws saying otherwise. But at the same time, they are prohibiting to fire terrorist-supporting teachers from the Arab sector. They insist on firing the National Security Minister because the Attorney General just doesn't like him. There is no cause whatsoever. There's a request to fire the head of the Shin Bet, the GSS. Remember, the first point I made was that you couldn't fire the head of the GSS during wartime despite his colossal failures? Well, now that they're the right-wing head of the GSS, suddenly there's petitions to fire him based on what? On newspaper clippings and nothing else. Radical left-leaning newspaper clippings. Encouragement of left-wing refusal and non-volunteering for the IDF, which of course is something that encouraged the Hamas to perpetrate the October 7th massacres. Calls for civil rebellion against the Israeli government. Arbitrary disqualification of basic foundation laws. Opening of countless futile investigations against Benjamin Netanyahu and his circle. Everywhere, on every issue, in every field, the government is required to pass this blockade, this wall of legal counsel of Gali Baharav-Miara, the Attorney General, and then the wooden gavel of the High Court. There's a petition for everything, an injunction for everything, a disqualification for everything. Law enforcement and judicial systems operating without authority to force an elected government into impotency and incapacitation by putting sticks in the wheels and interfering with basic functioning even during an existential war. And what does the former Chief Justice and the architect of all of this, Aharon Barak, have to say? That it is not enough. If more power is not given to the courts and the unrestrained officials and bureaucrats, we will cease to be a liberal democracy and become a one-man dictatorship. This should worry every person, every citizen of Israel from right to left, and every supporter of Israel. If this crazed rampage that brought us to the brink of civil war does not satisfy Don Aharon Barak, El Jefe, and the rest of his friends in the High Court, it is a sign that they want a judicial dictatorship in the style of the Ayatollahs in Iran, which we'll talk about next video, where they put on a show of democracy for the people via a puppet government devoid of any authority or influence. In a country where the news channel 14 may be closed because far left Yair Golan didn't like what he heard, and social networks will be blocked, just like in England, according to a list of people who criticize the courts or the police. The next elections will be elections on the question, who is the sovereign? The people through their elected officials, or the judges of the Supreme Court who elect themselves? This is what I have to say to you today, and I just want you to know that this whole list is ongoing all the time. Yesterday, the Attorney General made the crazy decision that the president cannot pardon a criminal, a individual. It cannot pardon Benjamin Netanyahu, despite the fact that it is pretty much the only power a president has currently in Israel. And it doesn't matter if he's been convicted or not, or if he's repentant or not. That doesn't change the law. The president is allowed to pardon even before conviction. Today, the Attorney General said that the Minister of Defense and the Ministry of Defense, it is illegal for them to decide that they do not wish to pay a fortune in subscriptions to the radical left paper Haaretz in order to provide those papers for officers in the IDF. In other words, they, according to the Attorney General, by law, they have to provide this radical left paper and are not allowed to choose to decide that they wish to not have such subscription that cost tens of millions of shekels to be spent for their officers. This is ongoing. This is crazy. Pray for Israel. Pray that this bureaucracy is broken up. Please pray for us. Shalom.